There it is. Busted pencils, fully leaded education talk. It is the educated educators who talk education. Dr. Johnny Lupinacci, me, Dr. Tim Slekar, and of course, our chairman of the boards, Jacob, producer Jacob. We are here, homeroom. And there's really important homeroom news that we have to get to, but just thinking about last Friday's producer's choice, and thought I'd throw this out to you guys as a question, where Jacob was asking about a little bit of rebellion in school and pushing the envelope. Now, this wasn't a student, but
Oh, you're going there.
I gotta,
You're
you
going
got
there.
to, dude.
I was hoping you weren't.
We just want to, talk a little bit, but in South Carolina, a teacher's assistant, teacher's aide, um, got
These are the things that come up in Tim's feed.
got in trouble for I guess you'd call it an act of rebellion, Jacob, by spraying. I didn't even know that there was a canned poop spray. Yes, truly an aerosol spray that creates the stench of your grandfather vacating the toilet on Friday after Thanksgiving. So,
Tim,
you're a poet with words, man.
I think Jacob and I both, saw that text. We have a group text where we chat news, happening related to education 99.9% of the time. And I think we were just going to willfully pretend that one went right past us both.
Come on.
But here you are starting the week off.
Well, listen, I got to tell you, though, how did this come about? This actually came about because I get every morning K-12 Dive, which is a briefing of all the K-12 news. And, they give you the news, and then they give you a section called What We're Reading. And this was one of the articles that K-12 Dive highlighted as they were reading. This comes from NBC News. Poop spray causes $55K in damage at South Carolina school. Teaching assistant arrested and charged. Not very much, I guess, youthful rebellion. However, getting into the article, and Jacob, if you want to put a link to it, I think for the show,
people need to see it. Yeah,
people need to see it. I didn't realize this too, but it then goes on to point out that this has occurred many times, and most of the times it is students that are doing it in different places across the country, because there is also an aerosol fart spray that has been used in the past by students. And does a foul stench cross the line? Well, they're saying this caused damage, and some students and teachers and faculty had to get checked out for respiratory issues. So, I think this might be one of those ones. I had to put it out there. Let's not comment. Go read it on your own, and maybe, I guess, the lesson here: if you're going to use poop spray for a prank, don't buy the aerosol. Go for the pump, because it seems like the aerosol maybe has some kind of, cardiopulmonary adverse effects.
Yeah, almost no comment. I mean, I think last week's show we talked about, like adolescent behaviors. I think this one falls outside of the boundaries of that. It's like we might expect needing to discipline a student for one of these poor decisions. There's something wrong with having to discipline an adult with this kind of behavior.
Tim does need to be disciplined.
Tim,
I'm sorry.
Tim,
okay,
I've got a comment on this, though.
Jacob, go.
You're telling me we don't need a Department of Education, and now that it's gone, this is happening? I think we need a Department of Education.
Thank you, Jacob. And in fact, yeah, my goodness, look at the chaos that is coming down the um chute. Um for sorry, I had to try a little bit there. Jacob, though, you bring up the education department, and yeah, I mean, we have been hearing how it is on its way out, it's disappearing, we need to get rid of it. But right now, though, the education department is going to, it appears to be doling out millions of dollars for this administration's, and I put it in quotes, patriotic patriotic education. This is, yes, this administration, Linda McMahon, the education department, big move going forward. In fact, I will quote Linda McMahon, why they're doing patriotic education grants. Quote, it is imperative to promote an education system that teaches future generations honestly about America's founding principles, political institutions, and rich history. Of which, guess what? I 100% agree with her on that statement. The honest teaching of the founding, the documents, the political systems. I can't argue with that, Lupinacci.
Well, yeah, Tim, we've said it on here before, that patriotism is one of the core democratic values. Now, patriotism doesn't mean revisionist history or, omitting, facts about how we have done great things as a nation and also how we have done some things like that aren't great at all. In fact, might be understood as awful. It's about learning about all of it. You don't pick and choose, just like core democratic values. You don't just get to pick one or two of those. There's a nice list of them. We've rattled them off before. Justice, equity, diversity, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and yes, patriotism, along with also popular sovereignty, right? All of those things. And the trick here is, we ought to be learning a balance of all of those. And in fact, a good definition of patriotism, according to core democratic values, is the practicing and understanding of all of these values. So I'm a big fan of this, much like I'm a fan of this, supposedly going away Department of Education funding research about AI in schools, because every teacher I'm talking to is asking questions about how are you using AI? How are your students engaged in this learning tool? What is it doing to help or hurt your classroom? These are good questions to not only ask and engage in conversation about, but to research. And that's some of the things that grants fund, is better understandings of things we do in our classrooms. So John, I'm kind of with you, Tim. I'm a fan of, hey, they're funding us, in a sense, how we teach social studies. Let's research how we teach social studies, which is quite near and dear to both of our professions.
Both of our hearts. You would think so, but
right.
John,
I mean, I'm spinning it how I want to spin it. This is the theme here, Tim. You get to spin it how you want to spin it.
But there's a but here.
And I bet there is, not just not just
especially what we talked about to begin with.
A couple of buts.
What will it take to get this money? The executive director of the American Historical Association, Sarah Weeksel, says, the very narrow conception of patriotism coming out of this current administration and this Department of Education is...
Oh man, you're crushing my dreams here, Tim. I was hoping to get some of this money.
Well, it says, they're concerned because this administration, whether it's through the Smithsonian, trying to say that we can't have exhibits that create some sense of negative stories about the past, that the American Historical Association is a little bit concerned about what it is that's going to be funded. And probably what is not going to be funded. And I'll just quote from the director there, Sarah Weeksel, quote, that context, meaning what we've seen in the past from the administration with the Smithsonian, with talking about what can and cannot be taught, tells us that the administration is interested in telling an uncomplicated celebration of American greatness, end quote. And Johnny, we talk about it, right? There is, patriotism, pride, love of country. We want to inspire that. I think there was a horrible potential wrong turn in some more extreme versions of teaching, um, the only negative, because I did see some teaching of really, everything's bad, America's awful, horrible things, right? And even that I would point out when, as again, my PhD in teaching and learning history, actually there are waves of the flavor of history that's been taught over the course of history of teaching and learning in American school, where we teach a certain way and then a new way comes in and kicks this one out, kind of like the old pendulum swing. And if you look at that history of how to teach American history in schools, there never really has been the good old days from a historian's point of view where we were teaching history. We have, in one way, taught very patriotic American, love your country with no blemishes. Then it would swing to a very negative story about history of this country, and to point out that actually neither one of those stories are histories. They're stories that were put together by a certain evidence and a certain position that people wanted to tell a certain narrative. But that if we're going to really advocate and study history, we would be saying that it's not about teaching love, hate, patriotism or not. The study of history would be an exploration of all kinds of different framings of how people try to tell stories about our past. And I'm again, somebody's going like, well, what are you saying? We shouldn't be teaching. I'm like, yeah, when you teach all of the blemishes and all of the celebrations as a big complicated story, that should inspire, Johnny, active patriotism and citizenship, because there, when you do one or the other, I think what ends up happening is that you continue to advance polar stories that either alienate or elevate certain groups of people in society, when the reality is that American public schools teaching our core humanities curriculum is not to separate people into your team versus our team versus their team. And I'm concerned that what I see here potentially is a funding of a story for a certain group of people to feel good, and a certain group of people will end up feeling poorly about this. So that's my concern.
Yeah, Tim, I'll give it a little, I'll coin a phrase of it. It's educational malpractice.
Hmm.
It's encouraging educational malpractice, because what you described is what teachers pretty much take an oath to do. And I'm comparing it to like what doctors do, right? They take a Hippocratic oath, to heal, right? To serve everyone in a healing way, to do least amount of harm. And educators do the same thing. And to, teach, to omit certain things in favor of others when that simply is not the truth,
Right.
right? It's simply not, is educational malpractice. And most teachers are not going to do this, and they're going to be called indoctrinating for it. But they're going to go through an era, where we do have freedom of speech still, it's under threat, but freedom of speech, as well as a responsibility, because all rights come with the responsibility to carry out that oath, to do the least amount of harm, to practice good education, to practice sharing the best available knowledge, like you said, Tim, about the goods and the bads and to mediate students thinking critically through those, right? Having ethical, dilemmas where they're saying, well, why did that happen? What was the context? When did it happen? How do we prevent these kinds of things from happening again? How do we be our best selves, be our strongest possible democracy or country or community, right? All of those things. That's what educators do, right? So, don't be part of teaching and be guilty of educational malpractice.
Nice.
Right? Practice. Did I just say practice?
Practice.
Practice.
What's wrong with practice?
And don't do as my bad reference to an old AI, different AI, Tim.
Oh.
Different AI than your AI, my AI from the sports world.
Oh.
Maybe some listeners got it out there. Praxis. You talking about
practice.
But anyways, I digress. I'm still hung up on. Also, don't, if you're out there and you're an adult who hasn't learned the boundaries, stay away from fart sprays. Right.
Boy. And with that, now it's time for your moment of Zen. This is not going to be a neutral class, I said to the class. I don't believe in neutrality.
And you can't be still on a moving train, right, Tim? Thanks for being on the train with us today. Choo-choo, it's Homeroom. We're off to a great week. Thanks for listening. And remember to grab great podcasts filled with more Busted Pencils content on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or of course, on the Civic Media website. And don't you dare miss out on this week's class in session on Wednesday. And you find our special drop of Producer's Choice on Friday. And of course, catch Busted Pencils on Saturday at 3 p.m. Central Time across all the Civic Media Network stations for 1 hour of your favorite blue-collar scholars, Tim and Johnny, and keep busting pencils.